Welcome to the Your Audio Solutions podcast, episode 15. It's awesome talking to you again. And this time I'm coming from Edinburgh, Scotland. I have a beautiful hill in front of me recording this podcast. I wish I could show you a picture, which I actually could if you go to my Instagram, Niklas Jepson. I can link to that below. Check this picture out. It's quite beautiful. Probably the best view for the podcast so far. Today we have the awesome Grammy Award-winning mixer, producer, Reid Shippen. He has worked with artists such as Randolph and the Family Band, NEEDTOBREATHE, Cage the Elephant, Backstreet Boys, Jack White, and many other awesome artists. In this interview with Reid, we spoke about why there's no such thing as a musical emergency, how he runs the business side of his studio, the importance of establishing systems, why you should underpromise and overdeliver, the importance of work-life balance, working out of fear, dealing with feeling overwhelmed. A lot of these topics with the business side and the personal side, so I think you're going to really love this interview and you can take a lot away and apply it to your own career, which is the main goal with this podcast, to be able to give you things you can apply to your own work. Other than that, been watching a lot of Jack Black's YouTube channel. I'm sure you're familiar with Jack Black, the singer, actor. You know, Tenacious D, awesome band. His YouTube channel is hilarious. His voice is just awesome. If you like his singing voice, which I do, I highly recommend you check his YouTube channel out. It's awesome. But before we get into the interview with Reid, I want to tell you about a free guide you can download right away. It's called 3 Tested Ways to Increase Your Client Base. And I made this guide for people who are a home studio owner, professional audio engineer, freelancer, and you want to increase your client base. In this guide, I will teach you how you can build relationships with bands online and contact bands online using my tested email script, how to build profitable relationships, how to make clients coming back for more, and how to price yourself. You can download this guide straight away just using the link below in the description. Check it out, it's free. I think you're gonna really love it and it's gonna help you increase your client base. But now, over to Reid Shippen. Thanks for coming out to the podcast, man. I really appreciate you taking your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I actually like to start this podcast with a quote I heard from you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you said there's no such thing as a musical emergency.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious. Right. I'm just very curious, what you mean by that and if you can expand on how you reached that conclusion.
Well, I mean, music and making music is a highly personal thing and people get really involved and really tied up in it. But the simple matter of fact is, when someone says they got to have something done on a Friday night, on a Friday evening, what's going to happen if you don't get it done? Is anyone going to die? Is World War III going to start? Are puppies going to go hungry? No, nothing's going to happen. And 9 times out of 10, when we're doing stuff like that, you realize you sprint so hard and you get all this stuff done. And a lot of times people try and cut corners because they feel like they have to. And then you get an email 2 weeks later from the artist or whoever and saying man, hey, I wonder if we could take another look at that vocal or whatever. So you're like, okay, so there really wasn't a deadline. So I just kind of tend to not allow people to turn things into musical emergencies.
And do you think that can also happen due to not being organized?
Well, I mean, generally creatives are the least organized people on the planet. So yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I try really hard to be very organized and systemic just so I know that I can lean on our systems to make sure that something's done. When I finish mixing a song, I make sure that when we turn it into somebody that they're getting all the different parts every single time, even if they don't ask for them, because then 6 months later when they're like, hey, we really need an instrumental, it's you got it. You already have it. I guarantee you it got turned in because we just do it for everybody. Stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, man. So obviously, you're self-employed as many of us are in the music industry. Uh, and I'm really curious how you run the business side of your studio. For example, making sure clients come in, that they hire you and all those sort of things. Um, so how do you work in that aspect of your career?
Well, I mean, pretty much everybody in the music business is self-employed anymore, right? I mean, I guess that's not entirely true. There's still people that work for companies,
Hmm.
but you know, everybody who's an independent contractor, whether that's a engineer or a producer or a writer or an artist, has to realize that they're a brand. Like, congratulations, you're a brand, you're a startup, you're an entrepreneur. This is just the way it works. So, I mean, as far as handling business goes, I'm fortunate enough to have a manager at this point. So a lot of times I make initial contact with people, and then I throw it over to my manager. She follows up and does, schedule and negotiates rates and like figures all that stuff out. But even when I didn't have her, it was just desperately trying to stay on top of everything. I mean, in this as in life, if you can establish systems that help you with a consistent workflow, then you don't have to constantly stress about, did I forget this or did I miss this? You kind of put it in a system where it always works the same way, the same time. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I also try and put balls in other people's courts. Like if someone says, hey, I'd like for you to mix a song, I'm not going to reply, cool. I'm going to reply, man, I would love to. Can you send me the song? I'd like to hear it. What kind of budget are you looking at? What kind of schedule? Like, when do you need it done by? And I put it on them to reply to me. Because I get a couple hundred emails a day. If I just say thumbs up to somebody and send it, then it's going to be something that I miss. And I'll completely honestly, I've missed gigs because I've just let an email slip too far down the thing, and then you find it like 6 months later and you're like, oh my gosh, I never responded to that.
Right.
So I'm constantly trying to refine that in my personal life, because I have a lot of different things going on, that more than just working on records, and it's hard to keep it all straight. So I'm constantly looking for a really good system to figure that out. I don't think I've perfected it yet, but I'm trying.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned in passing there a brand, how an artist or I guess engineer or producer needs to see themselves as a brand nowadays, as a startup.
Yeah.
Um, so do you have any tips on how to develop that brand, and do you see yourself as a brand too?
I mean, I think so. I think in this day and age, arguably everyone's a brand, right? I mean, isn't that really what Instagram is? Instagram is your brand book. Like, it's your brand feed. Most of social media is a brand.
Right.
And there's 10 million gamers out there at any given second, but only one of them is Ninja, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, I wanted something memorable. I was trying to figure out what I would use for a website, and I decided to use Robot Lemon because robots are cool and lemons are tasty in vodka,
Yeah.
but mainly it was because it's easy to remember and impossible to misspell,
Right.
right? So if you have a name that is difficult, like how many different ways do you think you can spell Nicholas Jepson?
Yeah, exactly.
Like 30, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
So
it's always wrong too. That's a problem.
yeah. And so instead of you registering 16 different ways of spelling your name, maybe you are just going to start calling yourself NJ, or you're going to call yourself Jep, or whatever you're going to do that's going to make it a little bit easier for people to remember who you are, until you do enough work that people will start recognizing your name.
Hmm.
So I don't know, that's one thought. It's something that artists do a lot, and for a time we were seeing producers do it, right? There's all kinds of, if you're in hip hop and R&B, they all have their own brand names,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
In rock, less so, although we still had Flood and Youth and people like that, you know.
But how much do you think being a brand is about adding value to people? So if you are an engineer, how important is it to accept the music side of things, obviously, but to add value to people's life in other ways to grow your
How,
name?
give me an example.
So for example, teach them about, you can be teaching your audience about mixing, for example. It's just a simple example, but something like that, you know.
You know, I think that can be very helpful if you know what you're talking about. I have seen a ton of people on the internet giving a ton of like mix tips where it's very obvious that they have no idea what they're talking about. Or, you know, you see somebody who puts all this stuff up about, you know, how to do this and how to do that. And then you listen to their mixes or you listen to their work and you're just like, well, this, you know, this is horrible. Why would it? No one's ever going to, you know, think that this is good. So, I mean, if you're giving good advice, like if Jakir King puts something up online, I'm going to listen to it. Like I'm going to listen to what he says. I'm going to take I'm going to pay attention to anything that Jakir says. You know, I'm going to pay attention to anything that Vance Powell says. I'm going to pay attention to anything that Greg Wells says. You know, because I know they do great work. Some guy who fills most of his social feeds with like, you know, mix tip number 15, use compression to make things sound exciting. Yeah, I'm not really interested in that. And I think that can actually weaken your brand because, you know, when you put yourself out there as an expert and you're trying to tell people how they should do stuff and then they listen to what you're saying or listen to the product that you have and it sounds terrible, like, you know, then you just get written off.
Right. Yeah.
So you gotta be careful.
Makes sense, man.
Underpromise, overdeliver.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good tip, man. Is that something you go by or you used to do?
Absolutely. Like I always want to try and give more to a project than is accepted. You know, I mean, is expected. Sorry. I want to, underpromise, overdeliver is kind of a good way to deal with the music business as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that saying, man. That's great. So I'm really curious about, you know, as a mixing engineer like yourself, when you get a project to work on from a band or artist, whatever, how do you try to understand what the artist wants their music to sound like? Do you ask them a specific set of questions, or how do you find that out?
Absolutely. And the first question is, where's the rough mix?
Yeah.
You know, I want to hear the rough mix, and I'll tell you why. This literally just happened on a project that I was working on. They sent tracks, and they didn't send a rough mix. And I asked for a rough mix, and they were like, well, you know, we kind of haven't been doing roughs, and then we did vocals, and the old roughs have the old vocals, and, you know, that's fine. And I was like, fine, then just send the instrumental, right? So I'm working on this song, and they finally send the rough mix, and I pull the rough mix up and listen to it, and there's a guitar on it that I don't have.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it was funny because I was actually kind of struggling with the mix a little bit because I was like, man, there is harmonic content in this thing that is just missing. Like, what's the deal? So I heard the guitar on the rough mix, and I emailed them, and I said, hey, I hear a guitar in this rough mix that I don't have. Is that something that you guys just decided not to use, or like, you know, what happened with that? And they were like, oh no, you should have that. As it turns out, this particular project, the live guitars just didn't get sent. And so if I didn't ask for the rough mix and I didn't check, what I would have done is I would have finished that mix and sent it to them, and they would have started playing it, and immediately they'd be like, this is wrong. There's no guitars in this. And then this is the first song on the project. The first impression they get is like, no, wrong. Like, this is bad. I don't want to start a project off like that. And I certainly don't want anybody listening to a mix like that. And I'm going to avoid it as much as possible by saying, send me your rough mix. I'm going to double check that everything's in there. You know, and that happened because I have actually sent off mixes and they're like, it's missing half the guitars. And I'm like, I didn't get any guitars. Right. So let's just not even do that dance. My assistant who sets up songs will listen to a rough mix and make sure that we got everything that's supposed to be in there.
Right.
You know, they've been listening to the rough mix for weeks or months. something that the way humans work is you listen to something enough times, it becomes correct. That's what's right. So you kind of want to have a frame of reference when you're starting, because if you don't and you do something really crazy off in the other direction, it might freak them out, unless that's where the song needs to go. And then sometimes you take that swing. It just depends.
Yeah. Um, and beyond just the rough mix and stuff, is there anything else you try to find out from the artist or band?
Sure. I asked them like what the vibe is, what they're going for, what kind of influences they have. A lot of times when people are working on music, they were like, oh, I was listening to this record and it's, I'm really kind of aiming for that. And especially in pop music, they're like, we're going for this. Like, we want it to sound like Greatest Showman, or we want it to sound like Katy Perry's Roar, or like whatever. And it's like, okay. And that gives you a frame of reference of kind of what they were aiming at, even if it's a totally different song. It's like, oh, if you were listening to that, then I kind of get it.
Right. And does it ever happen that they give you, well, you almost mentioned it now, but like conflicting messages, so they say they want to sound like some band or artist, but they're so different from what they actually.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time. And you have to kind of learn to read through that, because they're not, a lot of times people are just talking about an emotion or a feeling or whatever. And artists talk about emotions more than they talk about technical stuff.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful that you're paying attention to what they're saying as far as emotional content goes. And sometimes you just clarify. You're like, okay, so you said you wanted to sound like this Foo Fighters thing. You realize that the vocals on that are buried, right? Like, all right, is that the vibe you're going for? And sometimes they'll be like, no, we want it to rock, man, but we want the vocals to be loud. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't always work, but yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Right. It almost goes back to the over delivering, because you're doing a lot of work by asking the right questions and not just accepting the job. You still want to figure more stuff out about the project, I guess.
Yeah, well, mixing is a service industry job, right? Like, I only have to listen to a song for a day or a record for a week or so. They're going to listen to it for the rest of their lives. So I want to make sure they're getting what they want. And hopefully they trust me enough to go some different directions, or to open some stuff out that'll make it better. I mean, the worst thing is like, just make it sound like the rough mix. It's like, well, if you want it to sound like the rough mix, use the rough mix.
Right. Yeah, exactly, man. I'm very curious about this, because I also heard you say something about that you work with some people, closely with people in a music think tank, and that they were projecting like a 50 to 100 billion revenue over the next 10 years in the music industry.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about that. So, are you yourself in that music think tank, or what was your role in that thing?
Yeah, I mean, after you've done this a while, you tend to like attract a group of people. I was happily lucky enough to fall in with a group of really smart people, entrepreneurs and business guys and tech and IT guys. And, there was a formal structure built around a company called Flow that was starting up companies that I kind of was hanging out with those guys. And I don't think Flow is active anymore, but there's always stuff going on. And yeah, it's I was just looking at a pitch deck the other day for a programmatic audio company that I'm a part of, and they were looking at the trends of income for streaming. And even though the percentage rate of growth will decline as it becomes ubiquitous, right? As anything does, we were still looking at, was it 2024, like $40 billion worth of revenue.
Right.
The streaming model is going to actually be incredibly lucrative for music as a whole. Whether it passes on to the creators or not is a whole nother conversation. And if history will tell us anything, my guess is that most of it won't, but hopefully we'll figure out a way to circumvent that.
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, beyond artists, if they're going to see a pay increase, so to speak, how do you think it's going to affect engineers and producers like yourself?
Well, I mean, if people can make money making music, then they can, afford to pay people to help them make money making music.
Yeah.
The simple fact is the future music business will be ruled by the people who can do everything, all in one. They can write the song, play the instruments, program it, engineer it, mix it, master it, and put it out. Those are the people who are going to dominate. But there'll be plenty of other opportunities for engineers and mixers and producers and mastering guys and stuff like that, because most people aren't all great at everything. It's pretty rare.
Yeah, exactly. You said in passing that you're involved with a lot of entrepreneurs and tech startups and stuff. How has that affected your work in the studio, if it has at all? As in how you run the studio more than maybe the actual mixing.
As how I run the studio, well, my studio is basically just a mix room for me. I don't rent it out to anybody else, and other people don't really work in here. Every once in a while, like they mixed the new Sturgill record in here because he was working with one of my old assistants, and he wanted to work in a studio he was comfortable with, so they did it here, which was fine. But other than the fact that you have to be careful with scheduling your time, it doesn't really affect me much.
Right. Yeah, and how important is the work-life balance to you? Because I understood it's quite important, right?
Yeah, it's insanely important. Like if you don't have work-life balance, what are you working for, or what are you living for? There's guys that are workaholics and they love it, I guess. You want to try and have a balance because you only get one shot at this. So there was a really good thing that I read that was I think it was in a David Sedaris book. He said there's 4, and I think he was quoting someone else, but he said there's 4 burners, like on a stove. You have 4 burners in your life, and it's friends, family, work, and health. And successful people turn off 2, and extremely successful people turn off 3. It's scary,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But that's true. I mean, if you're going to devote 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 20 years to like one singular thing, you're probably going to get really, really good at it. I did that for years, but not for 20 years. And, I still want to have a great relationship with my kids and, my wife, and like have things to do and celebrate outside of the studio. Which probably means that someone who's willing to put in all the work in the studio and none of the work at home, maybe they'll beat me out on some stuff, but they might also be miserable, and that's not worth it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man, because I myself worked in a few studios around here in London as an assistant mainly, and I've seen that a lot, where people do work 12, 13, 14 hours every day, and seems a lot is fear based, and that's something I never really understood in some way, so yeah, it's just interesting hearing your thoughts about that, and it doesn't feel like working just because of fear seems so unproductive. I don't know what you think about that.
I think working out of fear puts a lot of pressure in areas that don't necessarily need to have pressure in them. Like, if you're working out of fear, you're not making decisions based on the music. You're not making decisions based on how things feel. You're not making. I just don't think it's a good basis for making good decisions.
No.
The sooner everybody in the creative industry needs to embrace the fact that we all have imposter syndrome, even the really big superstars, and that we're all just waiting for the day when somebody walks in and they're like, you have no idea what you're doing, do you? But the thing is everybody feels that. So just accept it as part of the human condition and move on.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah, it's well put.
Yeah, it never goes away. I'm doing a project right now. I sent the first mix out. I know that the mix is good. It's kind of honestly rare for me to be like, yeah, I think this is exactly what they wanted. But this one, I was like, yeah, I think that's exactly what they wanted. And I haven't heard back from them. So, of course, where does my mind go? It doesn't go to the fact that I've worked with these people and done this kind of stuff really successfully over and over again. It goes to well, they listen to it and they hate it. And they're just like trying to figure out a way to call me and tell me I'm fired. And, like all of that goes through your head. It's not especially rational, and it is exhausting. So, I mean, even though I know that is probably not the case, I'm still thinking it, right? So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna acknowledge that it's probably not the case, hope that it's not the case. And man, if it is the case, we have two options. It's like, you don't like it, fine. Can I change it to something you do like? Or if I'm not the right guy for this project, that's cool. I got other stuff to do, like go find the right person. I don't want to drag your project down. So that's incredibly rare, but or at least for me, it's rare. But it still happens, and that's cool. But I shouldn't be like spending 24 hours like super stressing over the fact that I haven't heard back from them. They're probably just in the studio cutting something, and they're busy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there many times. Exactly what you said. Freaking out about, oh, am I fired? I'm probably fired. Whatever.
Sure.
But yeah, it can be overwhelming, I guess, because depending where you are in your life, I guess, and career, that can be, yeah, pretty, forgot the word. Is the word debilitating? Is that a word?
Yeah, debilitating.
Yeah, yeah.
Only if you let it be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you start to, when you do this for a while, you start to listen to that little voice. There's sometimes when I'm working and they really wanted this song today and I really need to send it out. And I have that little voice that says, you know what, it's just not right. And sometimes for me, that's like, all right, I'm going to pay attention to that. I'm going to go home. I'm going to get up early. I'm going to come in and have a fresh listen. And I do that. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I should have fixed this and this and this. And then boom, in 10 minutes, like I've fixed all this stuff and it's great. So that's putting the work over the fear of someone's going to get pissed off because they really wanted to hear the song that night.
Right.
It's like, well, sometimes you don't get what you want.
Yeah. That's true, man. Have you ever felt like overwhelmed, like with too much work?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Okay. How do you?
I feel overwhelmed right now. I was freaking out about an hour ago trying to get done everything I need to get done, and yeah, it's something that's very easy to do, and I used to really freak out about it, and a while ago. And this is where there's no such thing as a musical emergency thing comes in.
Right.
Just said, you know what? It's going to work out. It just is. It's not that big a deal. I'll give you an example. I was stressing because I wanted to do this project and it had this deadline. And I was like, well, I could probably meet this deadline, but I don't know. Like I've got a lot of other stuff to do or whatever. And then, 4 days before we were going to do it, they changed the deadline.
Right.
So all that stress I spent, I shouldn't have been stressing about it because it worked out fine.
Yeah.
So most of the time it does work out. And if you get crunched a little bit, it's like, so you have to like drink a bunch of coffee and stay up late, or you have to, move something around or whatever. And I try and the way I schedule work is, rates shift around. And one of the things that I tell people, when they say, hey, well, can I get this, can I get a better rate from you? Can we do this for less money? I was like, yeah, we can. But schedule flexibility goes up. So if I run into trouble on something or somebody like a big client wants something faster or whatever, then the person who doesn't want to pay as much money has to wait. Wow. I think that's a fair way to do it. And I'm very upfront about people about that too, because I don't want to lead anybody on or let them feel like they're getting dissed. But hey, you want a discount? Cool, I'll give you a discount. You give something to me, and that's time.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Actually, I like that.
Cool.
So how, because you said you had a manager and stuff. So have you discuss with him or her like what rates they can give people, and or are you like heavily involved in each project, as in giving rates to each project, as you just mentioned?
Well, no, I mean, we kind of have ballparks for different scenarios, and like, I wouldn't want to pay a manager if I had to do all the negotiation myself, and I can
Mm.
like save the money and do it myself. But my time is better spent mixing or working on a different project or working on a company thing or spending time with my family than it is like micromanaging rates. So no, that's her purview. But she'll ask. She'll say, "Hey, they want to do this, or they only have this, or can we can maybe fit this in?" And I mean, it's just kind of it's a give and take. But I don't like micromanaging.
Right. That makes sense, man. So patience. That's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Um, what are your thoughts about patience, especially working in the music industry?
Patience in what sense?
Right. Yeah. So patience, as in you want everything to happen at once, but it most likely will not. Like you have to have patience and determination, I guess, to finally succeed in this career that is music.
With very few exceptions, most of the people who are successful in the music business are successful because they have just kept at it for years and years and years.
Hmm.
You know, um, every once in a while, you're going to find someone who's just naturally amazing at something, but usually it's a ton of work to get there. So, I mean, if you believe that you should just be naturally lucky and it doesn't take a ton of work, then, don't get a real job, just play the lottery. Because if you're that lucky, it should be pretty easy to make $10 million and then you won't have to work, right? But that's
Yeah.
not the way it works. So our society right now has a problem with, they're trying to compare themselves. Like, don't compare your everyday to everyone else's highlight reel. Guys like Andy Wallace or Spike Stent or CLA or Greg Wells or Eric Valentine or Vance Powell, they have put in a just decades worth of work, really, to get to where they are. And you think you're gonna, buy a laptop, watch a couple of YouTube tutorials, and then like take them to school? Good luck.
Yeah. True,
I find
man.
out the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Right. But doesn't it also go back, because we said, the people who don't quit and who are in for the long game usually are the ones that succeed in whatever that can mean for a person. But doesn't that, to be able to play the long game, so to speak, can you then do the 12, 14 hours a day for 20 years? That's been one of my questions to myself. Like, if you want to play the long game, you also have to be able to do it smartly, I guess, rather than just I'm just gonna burn myself out for 10 years, and that's gonna get me there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one of the things that I do is I co-teach a class for music business students with one of my with a good friend of mine who's been a successful entrepreneur. And one of the things we tell them is like, you're really fortunate when you're young because you have all the time in the world to get good, right? Like, you don't have a family, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have all of these other things that pull you around. Like, you can devote time like getting great. And if you want to, if you're a young recording engineer or producer or artist, and like you're hanging out with friends 4 nights a week and you're playing video games and stuff like that, then you're not serious. Just go get a real job. Like, you're not serious, because the person who is like bleeding out of the eyes and just killing themselves to make their stuff as good as it possibly can be, they are serious and they will kick your ass.
Hmm.
So, I came up the old school way, with intern and then assistant engineer and all of that. And there was a time period, it was like 3 or 4 years, I actually kept records that I was averaging 16 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
That was the average.
Yeah.
So, And I was the best assistant in Nashville, because I put in my time and I worked really hard to get good at it and I cared about it. So I think there is a period in your life when you have to do that. But I don't know that you have to do that for 30 years.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah.
You know, or
Um,
that I'm willing to do it for 30 years. Maybe there's someone else that is, and maybe those people are better than me, but I'm making a pretty good living. I'm working on stuff that I enjoy, and I still have a life. So I'm going to pick that.
yeah, totally, man. Um, so you mentioned, working as an assistant in Nashville. So how did you, well, first of all, get into the recording studio as an assistant?
I went to school for recording and spent most of my time in school in the studio as much as I possibly could. And then I started interning around Nashville. And one of the internship opportunities, I was interning at this studio, and this one engineer was in there, and he was kind of young, super talented guy named J.R. McNeely. And he was engineering this thing, and I just asked him if I could hang out because I was going to be there anyway. I was like, can I hang out and observe? And I was just kind of hanging out and helping, and they had this big project where they were synchronizing video and like 2 inches and a 32 track digital machine and DA88s and video and like all of the synchronization stuff. And it was complicated, and they were working for like a half a day trying to get it to work, and they couldn't get to work. And they were like, we're going to go to lunch. Like, so they took off, and I was kind of sitting there. I'd been watching them do that. And I was like, I think maybe what if we tried this thing? When they came back from lunch, I was like, hey, check this out. And I hit play, and everything synchronized. And they were like, how the hell did you do that? I was like, I just honestly, it was scientific method. I just ran down all the things and tried to do it a step at a time. And they were like, dude, that's amazing. And a couple days later, they were going to another studio to do some other stuff. And I was like, well, man, thank you so much for letting me hang. And they're like, oh, no. You're coming with us. Like, you're an assistant now. Like, let's go. We're paying you. Let's go. So, that's how I became an assistant engineer.
Yeah.
And then I did that for a while, a long time. And if I'm completely honest, that internship period between school and doing all the internships, I survived because I had a girlfriend with a good job.
Right. Yeah, I think I heard Chad Smith, the drummer from Red Hot Chili Peppers. He said, if you want to make a living as a drummer, get a rich girlfriend.
Yeah. Let's get it back.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So was that in the 90s or early 2000?
I would have started in the mid to late 90s.
Right. And so after you became an assistant, then when you went into full-time engineering, or not full-time, but yeah, head engineer, main engineer, whatever you want to call it. What was that process like? And
that happened strangely. Fairly early on, I was working on a hip hop kind of project for this artist named Grits, and they only had the money to hire like the big mix engineer to do like 3 songs on the record or whatever, and then the producer was like, well, I'll just mix the rest. So I had been assisting that guy, the big guy, doing the songs. And I said to the producer, who I'd kind of gotten to know, I was like, well, hey, I got an idea for you. Why don't you let me take a swing at one of these tunes? And if you get here and you don't like it, no big deal. You're going to mix it anyway. But if you get here and you like it, I just made your life easier. And he said, okay. And then when he got to the studio, like, later the next day, like, and hit play on the song, he loved it. So he's like, why don't you just mix the rest of the record? I was like, all right, cool. Because I was getting paid to be there as an assistant anyway. And I mixed the rest of the record, and that led to more records, and that and relationships that I had made as an assistant. Like, people started hearing that I was engineering and I was mixing, and they would call me to mix stuff, and then it just went.
Right. That's cool, man.
Yeah, very lucky.
Say it again.
It was very lucky.
Right, yeah, but also, luck doesn't come without hard work, I guess. And all those sort of things. So when did you...
Luck is basically when opportunity meets preparation.
Yeah, exactly. That's the saying. So when did you decide to start your own studio then, the Robert Lemon?
I had always wanted my own studio, and I figured out pretty early on as a mix guy that I didn't like moving. Nashville had a ton of studios, right? And they were all good studios, but every time you move to a new studio, like, all right, let's book Starstruck and go there and mix this record, I felt like I was guessing at, like, especially stuff like the low end or the way the room was like working. And it's like you never really know for sure. You're just guessing. So really early on, I just decided that I was going to like hole up in one studio and just work there. So I was in one place for like 5 years and another place for like 5 years. And then I always wanted to just have my own place. So then I finally just kind of made that happen.
And that became Robert Lemon then, I
Yeah.
assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my personal mixer.
Yeah. And have you ever thought about moving to LA and do mixing there, or is Nashville? Because I keep hearing Nashville. I know it was in the past the music capital, but then I'm hearing it's becoming the music capital again. Well, maybe it's always been the capital.
I think Nashville is arguably the songwriting capital of the country. There's a lot more music going on here. If I had to do it over again, knowing what I know now, I may have gone to LA as a very young engineer. But I don't want to go there now for a couple of reasons. It's insanely expensive. I don't want to raise kids in LA. I don't like LA all that much. I like visiting, and I like my friends that are there, but I don't think I'd want to live there.
Right.
I mean, even if you just consider, and you're in London, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you've got traffic and the tube and all of that stuff. But if you add a 45-minute or an hour commute to my day, 2 hours in the car plus the amount of hours that I normally work, I wouldn't have time for anything else.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the commute in LA must be awful, you know.
It depends on where you live. I mean, if
Sure.
you have a trust fund, I'm sure your commute is great. You can just buy a place in Malibu and you're fine. But I mean, that's not realistic for a lot of us. So I don't know. I think the biggest thing about moving to an LA or a London would be more the people that you get to network with. I don't think anyone is saying, well, we don't want to mix in Nashville because Nashville's not cool. They're saying we want to mix with so and so. But if I had spent 15 years in LA, I would know a lot of people that tend to hang out in LA, right? So there's opportunities that you get from getting to know the people that hang out in those circles. And that'd be a lot more rock stuff and a lot more pop stuff and a lot more hip hop stuff. Whereas Nashville is more like indie music and country music and contemporary Christian stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, for sure, man. Um, but when it comes to like building relationships and, networking, so to speak, do you have any, not tips maybe, but do you have any strategy or thing that you like to do when you do that?
Yeah, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
That's crucial. I mean, that's crucial it's crucial as an intern or as an assistant or just like in general. Just don't be a dick. Don't be shitty. Is part of it. Like, listen to people. Underpromise, overdeliver. The same thing. We get interns all the time. That are hoping to turn something into a job or to like build their network and building your Rolodex. Your network is a crucial part of good business. But if you come in and you intern for me and you're an idiot, like, I'm not going to recommend you to anyone. I'm not going to hire you. I can probably figure out in like a day whether someone's going to make it or not as at least with us. So the same thing, I think the same thing holds true is, just help people out. Like, I love living in Nashville because it's no big deal on a regular basis to be like, hey, I can't do this. You should call Vance or you should call Jakir or whoever. And like, we throw stuff around in between it. And we're very, complimentary. When one of my friends, like, hits a home run or whatever, like I'm super complimentary about it. I love to see people succeed, and it's not just cutthroat competition. I'm great, everyone else sucks. Like I think that fosters a good environment for creativity as a whole, and also for building good networks. And building a good reputation.
Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah, giving other people praise for their work, I think is, can be really good, especially if you think, that could be hard maybe in the beginning or something when you think it's me against them, but in the end we're all together on the same mission ish.
Well, it can be you against them. Maybe it's always you against them, but that doesn't mean when somebody does something that's totally killer that you can't be like, man, that sounds amazing, or that was a great track, or that was fantastic. Like, that doesn't hurt you at all.
No, yeah, exactly, man. So what could be some of the most stupidest thing a new intern can do that you have experienced?
Oh,
If you want to say it.
yeah, sure. No, I mean, we just went through a crop. I mean, the dumbest thing is to be asked to do something and not do it, right? Because I mean, that's what we're going to do with interns. It's like clean the bathroom, take out the trash, you know. Or one that I really like is like, hey, like, if this were your studio, what would you do? I brought one intern in and I said, hey, look around, and like, there's some stuff that needs to be cleaned up maybe when I'm not here. So like that stuff over there, or anything that you see that's like this, or anything you see like that, just kind of straighten it, like pretend it was your room and like clean up all that stuff. And, he didn't do it. So, I mean, maybe he did one or two things, but he definitely didn't like go for it. Right.
Right.
And so it's like, am I going to trust you to do something crucial if I can't trust you to do something banal? No. I need to know that when we're doing stuff that you can do what is asked for you. In fact, what I want to see in interns is them doing stuff before we ask for it. Like, hey man, I came in and you were busy with a client in there. So, I went into the side room and I organized all of the cables because it's just easier to find stuff when they're all in the right places. Like if somebody does that, you're like, okay, cool, initiative. And, we had a party recently and a couple of the interns were like drinking early and they kind of got smashed at the party and they didn't do stuff that they were asked. And you're just like, guys, I mean, it's cool. We try and foster a family vibe here, but it's like, you have to earn the bro status. Like, you have to earn the hang status. You don't just do it because like now you're here. And those guys are gone. But the one guy that did everything he was asked to do and did a really good job, he's actually right now getting paid to work on a project for our archival company. And has been for the past couple weeks. Like, he's already graduated to paying work because when we asked him to do something, he did it. And then you started to realize you could trust him with stuff. So now we're actually trusting him on a job.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I think that's really good for people to hear, who wants to get into the industry.
Yeah.
Nice. So do you have any people you have as a mentor or that you aspire to be in the industry?
I think anybody who's successful in any industry has had mentors. And if you want to be successful, you should seek them out. So yes, I had mentors coming up. I had one guy in particular, a guy named Rick Will, who was a really cool engineer, mixer, producer guy here in Nashville. And I assisted him for like probably 4 years and we were super tight and he taught me a ton of stuff. And, we worked on a ton of cool records together. He was fantastic. As far as people you look up to, I mean, there's so many people that are good in this industry, I could probably spend the next 5 minutes making a huge list of people who are awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just email it to you.
Yeah. That's fine, man. But do you have any when it comes to running a business, like, a business, I guess?
Sure. Tim Cook.
Right.
Warren Buffett, Bill Gates.
Yeah.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, I have friends that I can ask. I have people that I rely on for business advice and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So yes, I suppose I do. I mean, isn't part of this whole deal is, building a Rolodex, which is your contact, and I recognize it's an antiquated word, but it's a fun one. It's a fun encapsulation.
Yeah.
And building a reputation kind of go hand in hand. And if you work hard and you give people value, whether that value is encouragement or that value is some benefit of some kind, or the value is just doing good work, or helping somebody when they need a handout, like, you kind of start to build a circle of trusted people that you can lean on when you need advice.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly, man. That's really well put. So, do you have a favorite failure? As in something that when it happened seemed like a failure, but it was actually success in disguise?
I think, um, sure. I don't know about a specific. I mean, I've failed a lot. Um, Failure is by far the most efficient way to learn.
Hmm.
You know, um, and if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. Um, and so yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it's out of your control too. I mean, I had one client, a fairly big client that we had a lot of success on, like, a record with, and then for whatever reason on the next record they decided to fire me, um, twice actually, and that was a huge blow to the ego, and that was a big bummer. But while that was happening, like right when that happened, another opportunity came along that I wouldn't have been able to take if I hadn't lost the first job. And that opportunity ended up being, now years later, like a much bigger deal.
Hmm.
Uh, so maybe that was fortune or providence or just blind luck. But I mean, it's failure is how we learn.
Yeah,
Fall
yeah,
7 times, get up 8.
yeah, exactly, man. That's great that you got another better opportunity right when that happened.
Yeah, I was
Um,
fortunate because I was freaking out.
yeah, I mean, like anyone would. Um, but so you said they fired you twice. Are you able to get into the specific? Why did they do it twice?
Well, the first time I was supposed to go in and track, um, and then mix. And when I went into the tracking session, they had been in like pre-pro, like just kind of working and recording and whatever. And they were already in a flow and they were already recording stuff. So they were like, you know what? We don't need you to come track it. It's already kind of happening. It was like, oh, well, I mean, that would have been nice to figure out, like, not on the day I was tracking because I set aside time to do that. But, I mean, shit like that happens. And then the mix process, honestly, yeah, I'll give you a good failure story. On the mix process, I had decided for some strange reason to kind of like upgrade some stuff in my studio and change a bunch of stuff around. And I did that. And the mixes that I were doing, you're like, well, I got to mix this stuff because this is, when it's supposed to be done. And what we talked about earlier, I didn't listen to my little voice like, hey, this isn't good enough. I was like, I think this is fine and we got to get it done and we got to move on. And this is a lot of pressure and whatever. And I just don't think the mixes were that good. And they were just like, nope, we don't want to use you on this project. And that kind of, I mean, that hurt, right?
Hmm.
That was tough.
Hmm.
And that made me also reevaluate another project that I was a couple mixes into, and they were totally fine with the mixes, right? They thought they were great. And I listened to them and I went back to them and I said, listen, I know you're cool with these and I don't really want to open up this can of worms, but I think these can be a lot better. So I'm just going to redo them. And they were like, well, we really like them. I was like, well, if you like them, you can keep them, but I'm going to redo them for me. Like, I'm taking the time. I'm obviously not going to charge for that. Like, I just need to do it for me. And I did it. And they were a lot better.
Hmm.
I had fixed some technical problems that should have been fixed in the first place. And I had just kind of recentered how my workflow was going, and they were a lot better. And they ended up, really liking that. And a little while later, they just said, we really appreciate you doing that. Like, there's not a whole lot of people who would take something that was approved and then be like, yeah, but we can make it better. So maybe that's part of why they stuck with me, and we've done a ton of records together since.
Right. That's awesome, man. So I actually want to ask this in the beginning, but I'm going to ask you now. I'm just very curious because I love to hear, some new cool stuff to listen to. So I just wonder if you can give some nice recommendations, either if it's your own work or anyone else's, but some cool new records to listen to.
Yeah, that's tough. So I used to be the guy that always had like the new cool stuff, right?
Right.
And now it's a real struggle to find time to listen to music for fun, because I'm working on it all the time, and to be completely honest, like after you work on music for 12 hours, the last thing you want to do is go listen to music.
Yeah. It makes sense, man.
So that's tough.
Yeah.
I don't
That's fine, man.
I don't know. I would have to like go offline and maybe put together a playlist or
That's
or
fine.
something.
I mean, the reason I'm asking because I'm myself also just struggling to, well, first of all, to go through all the new stuff or just go through any music on Spotify because there's so much stuff. I think I talked to John Paterno. I think he said there's like 20,000 songs added a day.
Oh yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, I mean, so there's just so much music nowadays and so much stuff to go through to even find something that tickles your ears, even. So yeah, I just want to see if you had any cool recommendations.
Yeah, no, I wish I had one to pull out for you. A lot of times when I find stuff, it's because either my kids hear it and they're like, "Hey, check this out. This is really cool," or I have peers like sending stuff, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, honestly, the last thing that I was listening to yesterday or this morning was that little Nas X track,
Right.
Old Town Road, which is hysterical and awesome. Like it's brilliant how simple it is.
I need to check that out.
Yeah, no, it's a trap / hip hop artist from Atlanta doing kind of a country. Well, it's been like the number one song for like 17 weeks. Like it's crushing records. And
What was his name again? You said
Little Nas X.
right.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, I will.
It's
Man.
massive in America right now. Like it is crushing,
Right.
and it's really, really simple, and that's why it's great.
Nice, man. Yeah, thanks for the recommendation. We got there again. But just before we wrap up here, man, where can the listeners find more info about you and hire you for work and stuff like that?
If you just Google Robot Lemon, you'll find me.
Right.
Or robotlemon.com. I mean, that's kind of the base for most of my music stuff.
Nice.
That's an easy place to find me. And I should probably put up like a Spotify playlist of stuff I've worked on or whatever,
Right.
I should share that.
Yeah.
You can share your show notes if you want.
Yeah, exactly, man. And are you on social media at all?
Yeah, mostly on Instagram, also at Robot Lemon. You can find me on Facebook under my name. You can actually probably find me under Robot Lemon there too. I don't spend as much time on Facebook just because it's difficult. It's a time suck, and there's just a lot going on right now. But plus I need to, I just need to keep my blood pressure under control, and the less I hear about what this idiot Donald Trump is doing, the better off I am. Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. I don't bother with Twitter. I don't see a need for Twitter.
Right. Yeah, same here. I don't have it myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for coming out to the podcast, man. I really appreciate you taking your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome talking to you, man.
Thank you very much, Reid, for coming on to the podcast. It was awesome talking to you, and hope you, the listener, enjoyed it as well.
Please leave a rating and a comment if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or YouTube. I don't believe Spotify does comments and ratings, but if it does, please leave it there too. And again, don't forget to download your free guide using the link below. 3 tested ways to increase your client base. Download it for free. Let me know what you think and if it helped you. Also, if you have any suggestions on this podcast, any comments you want to leave, feel free to send me an email at niklasjepsen@gmail.com. I hope to hear back from you. That's it for this week, and looking forward to seeing you or speaking to you next week.